Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I've Never Told You, production of iHeartRadio. And it is time for another edition of Female First, which means we are once again joined by the terrific, the talented Yves. Welcome, Yves.
Hi.
Always so happy to have you on. And as usual, you have been up to all kinds of things. What have you been doing, Yves?
So I guess we were talking a little bit before the show started about I got my wilderness first responder certification recently. And I got to spend a little time in Western North Carolina, which I like to go to in general anyway. A beautiful place. So I got to spend time there and do something that's not at all related to what everybody listening knows me for, which is writing and history and podcasting. But if y'all have been listening long enough, then y'all know that I do love outdoor stuff and I care a lot about how we relate to each other in the outdoors. I care a lot about Black people being in the outdoors and have become more and more interested in outdoor leadership in recent years, and also in like the ways that I can contribute to community care as the world changes in so many different ways. But it's like one of those things where it's like, I can, so I will. Like, I know that I am willing to learn the skills of caring for people in the wilderness if any emergency situation should happen. So it's kind of like, okay, well, if I'm willing to, there are plenty of other people who aren't willing to, then I will. And I know those skills are transferable outside of wilderness context too. So yeah, a lot of reasoning behind it. But yeah, that was definitely a recent highlight for me.
And we love that about you, Yves. Always that kind of drive to learn is so important. And it's one of the reasons that I think media like this is important, is that curiosity and sharing that curiosity. And this relates to the person you are talking about today. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask you, have you ever ridden a horse?
Yes, but it's been like a really, really, really long time. So when I was a child, I don't remember where or when exactly, but I know that I have. It's like also one of those things where it's like, oh, they're horse riding. Like there are horse riding places where you can do to go horse riding. If I'm on an excursion, if I'm somewhere, there are excursions related to horse riding, basically. And I always think about doing them and I don't do them. But I would like to some more. What about y'all?
I rode a horse when I was 9, and it was at a fair, and I swear I got chickenpox from it, but I probably just got chickenpox from the fair. And then there's a place near where I grew up where you could ride horses and go on like trails and stuff, and I did that. I remember it being more painful than I thought it would be, actually. Oh, yeah. And then some people in my family had horses, and I was incredibly jealous, but I never got to ride any of them. So...
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about it. I'm just thinking about it. Don't do it. I know, I'm not going to do it.
There's this famous story where I was blamed for killing a horse, but I didn't.
It's in the back of my head. That's one of the first things I learned about her, and I was very fascinated. But all that to say, I have not ridden horses. They scare the hell out of me. I'm like, they're modern day dinosaurs to me. But they are like really pretty to look at from afar. And I did work when I worked with children who would do volunteer in making, because they were therapy horses, and they were wonderful. So we would come through and clean and have like lessons, and like people, like it's one of the best things to have young kids who get to try new things. And being around horses with the crew that I had was not something they did often. So we really were excited to be able to work with them. So I love people who care and have horses, but I am actually petrified of horses because to me they're like giant animals that could just run me down. So,
and could.
No, and could. Exactly. So I'm like, no, thank you. I'm going to respect you from way far over here.
That's smart. They do feature in a lot of horror movies.
They are. Well, like, I feel like it's something that maybe later down the road, if the apocalypse type of things happen, I need to learn to ride one just in cases. But I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, but is it worth the cost? Maybe I'll just, lay down and give up after that. Like,
You know what? That is so funny you said that, Samantha, because I literally was talking to my husband about this when we were driving somewhere. No, and I when I pass things and I'm in a romantic mood, like when I'm like romancing the world, you know what I mean? When I'm just like everything looks
imagining.
Yeah. Everything looks wonderful. I'm like, I want a horse. And I was thinking about like how useful that skill would be in apocalypse, because I am in the process of like trying to acquire apocalypse skills, which is another reason this wilderness first responder thing comes in handy. And learning to drive stick shift. I've gotten a lot better at it now.
I feel like I need to do that too.
Yes. And so horses are definitely on the list, because if you look at all the apocalypse stuff, it's like, okay, no fuel needed.
Right.
Horses are around, they're strong, they're plentiful, and, have been helping humans out for a really long time.
Very long
But
time.
yes, is it worth it is the question. Like, there's so many other things for us to learn in the world. Is that one of them?
It is a skill. I'm always impressed in seeing like rodeo shows or people who actually just love horses and really care and put a lot of work into training themselves in horses. I feel like that's such a skill. But yeah, I feel like that's something that I have bypassed. Like, it feels like a thing that, again, with all the pain, I'm like, I have too many knee problems, too many back problems to be like, this is not for me. But I also am glad that you are taking all these classes, Yves, because I'm going to put you on my team. I'm like, this is how we survive.
Yes.
She's a part of the crew.
Rising in the ranks of usefulness. First is my goal.
So, who are we talking about today, Yves?
We're talking about Sylvia Rideoutt Bishop. And I think I was trying to remember when I came across her, because she's been on my list for a really long time. And I just wanted to read the book that exists about her before I brought her. And I was trying to figure out the right time and what felt right. Sometimes I'm weird about who I bring on. It's like I have people on the list forever, and I'm just like waiting for a time that feels right. And now just felt right. But I think it was when I was like going to a national park in West Virginia. I was at New River Gorge. I think this was around that time. And so I was thinking about Black history in West Virginia. And I think that might have been when I came across Sylvia Rideoutt Bishop. But either way, I'm excited to talk about her today. She was the first Black woman who was licensed to train racehorses in the United States. And her history, she's from West Virginia. So should I get started into our story?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So her parents were Bertha and James Howard Rideoutt. They got married in May of 1915 in Charlestown, West Virginia. She was 17 and he was 23. And their first child, Flora Elaine, was born in February of 1916. So James was drafted into the Army in October of 1917, and he served as a food service cook in France. But the war ended, and by June of 1919, James had returned back home from France. And Sylvia was born on October 5th, 1920, in Charlestown, West Virginia. She was her parents' fourth daughter, not the last. They had a lot of kids. At first, she was named Cora, and later her name was changed to Sylvia Augusta Rideoutt. Now, she had 16 siblings. Not all of them, though, lived past their toddler years. But their family, they grew fruits and vegetables in their backyard. They also had hogs and chickens. And they lived in this community called Potato Hill, which was on the west side of Charlestown. Now, Sylvia's childhood is interesting, but like not unusual, because when she was almost 2 years old, she went to live with a couple not far away, Lavinia and William Payne. They had a lot of children, but so this other family helped take care of her. They didn't have any children themselves. Lavinia and William didn't, but still, Sylvia was apparently the only one out of all of her siblings who was sent to live outside of the house. And Sylvia said this. She said, "My mother was sick and I was the baby, and the Paynes were very good friends." So it seemed like it was a timing situation. They were good friends. She would take care of her. They had a lot of children, and like it wasn't unusual for a family with a lot of children to seek help from outside the family to help them care for and raise the child. But yeah, so she said that in this book called Sylvia Rideoutt Bishop Had a Way with Horses. That's by Vicky Moon. So you can find a lot of information about Sylvia Rideoutt Bishop and about horse racing in general in that book. And I just wanted to call that out up front because like a lot of the information that we'll talk about today from Sylvia is from that book. And it's a pretty good resource for her story, but also like horse racing in general, because it's its own world. There is a lot to learn about it. There's a lot of history in there, and there's a lot of Black history specifically there too. So that's a good resource. But anyway, Sylvia was baptized on April 1st, 1923. And at that time, the Paynes were listed as sponsors and as godparents to Sylvia. The Payne family, the way it's described in the book, really took good care of Sylvia. She got new clothes a lot. And in the winter, Sylvia would go back home with her parents and siblings while the Paynes went to Florida with their employers. So there was some back and forth. She would go back to her house she would be with the Paynes, and then she would go back to her parents, and then she would be with the Paynes. So she went back and forth, and they didn't live far from each other. But it was so, like, they were so close, and they took care of her for so long that Sylvia even later inherited a home from the Paynes. But we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But yeah, on Easter Sunday in 1929, this is part of her origin story with horses, a man was going from house to house selling a 2-minute ride on his pony named Targa, which she never forgot that pony's name, apparently. And that ride would be 10 cents. And to take a photo, that would be an extra quarter. And please look at the photos. In that book, there are some photos, but there is such a cute photo of her when she's young and on that horse. But it's really nice to look at those photos and see like how clearly enthusiastic she was about it at the time. And she did love that experience. She loved riding the horse, and she talked about the way it smelled. And it's funny because apparently the way people smell horses, they smell them differently. So they have like the way they think about the smell of horses, people who ride them, is all different. But I do like smells are so often associated with memories. Like it's one of those things. So it's interesting that she talked about the smells. But yeah, she went to the Eagle Avenue School, which was also called the Charlestown District Colored School. And in December of 1933, a racetrack opened in Charlestown. It had 12 stables, 44 betting windows, and it had a heated grandstand. And Sylvia began going to that racetrack. She was watching the trainers, she was watching the horses. And just after she finished the 8th grade, she began working at the racetrack. So she started attending Storer College in Harper's Ferry when she was a 9th grade student because there were no high schools for Black students. And she continued living with the Paynes. And like I said, they took care of her. So they bought her a car so she could drive herself to school. She was working in the school kitchen in the lunchroom as well, though, to help pay her tuition to the school. And her classmates would sometimes ride with her to the school and help her pay for gas. But to earn extra money, Sylvia would walk the horses after their morning workouts at the track. And during her time that she worked there, she was learning more about caring for horses. So she was basically learning on the job. But after 3 years at Storer College, she had to leave. She had to work. She didn't graduate from there, and Lavinia Payne was sick. But in October of 1943, she purchased 2 lots of land from her grandfather, Charles A. Snowden. The lots weren't that far from her childhood home in Potato Hill. And a couple of years after that, she married John Bishop at St. Philip's Episcopal Church in Charlestown. They got a dog, a Dalmatian named Tank. And like you, Samantha, not to call you out, he was afraid of the horses.
Yeah.
he liked betting on them, but apparently, according to like family members, family friends, he was pretty dang on scared of the horses. But that didn't stop him from like being involved in the business and being married to Sylvia, who was clearly very involved with horses. But yeah, so In 1946, Sylvia sold the 2 lots that she bought from her grandfather. And John was like, so although he supported Sylvia, he himself was more interested in the entertainment industry. He would produce musical events. Like he produced one that was at what was previously John Brown's farm. And he was interested in like the Chitlin circuit. But in 1947, Sylvia and John bought an inn near Charlestown for $4,000. They didn't pay all of that up front. I think it was like $2,000 or so they paid up front, and then they paid the rest later. But John had a nightclub there. He was involved there at night since Sylvia was doing all this work during the day. And in July of 1951, Sylvia and John, they drove to the Cumberland Fair in Cumberland, Maryland. The fair had horse races, and Sylvia's horse, Bouple, won her race by 6 lengths. Sylvia won $625, and John, a betting man, won $57.80. But yeah, they apparently John was a fan of Buicks. There were a few Buicks in their story. Sylvia and John used that money that they won to make a down payment on a 1949 Buick. And in Bouple's 4 years of racing and 32 races, that was the only time that Bouple won. But not to fret, like there were a lot of other wins in Sylvia's history and all of the horses that she trained. But yeah, the Bishop's horses, Quick News and Wise Bet, they won races in May of 1953 in Ohio. And they ended up earning the Bishops after those races more money in June on the Ohio circuit. So there are so many races that Sylvia did over the course of her career. It would be like, it would take forever to go through all of them in this episode. So we're not going to do that. You can go read about more of them if you're interested in the intricacies of how much they won each time, where all of the races were, how long the horses' careers were, a little bit more about the horses, the people who were the jockeys. All of that stuff is in the book, but just know that Sylvia she trained horses for many races for many people over the years. And at first, Sylvia was training horses under the radar. She didn't have a license, so her name would not be listed in like the official programs. Her husband, for instance, would be recorded as the trainer on the programs, even though he wasn't actually involved with the day-to-day operations and training of the horse. He was still listed as a trainer. And while he was listed, Sylvia was the one who was like cleaning the stalls. She would be wrapping the horse's legs, and she would be up early in the morning training the horses. But Sylvia got pregnant, and on January 5th, 1958, she was lifting a saddle onto a horse when her water broke, and her daughter, Laverne Augusta Bishop, was born. Sylvia was about 37 years old at the time, and she took like 6 months off of racing. And she had help. She had a nanny named Sarah Eliza Jones who lived with them until she died in the late 1970s. Although Laverne, as y'all know, she had a lot of siblings. Sylvia had a lot of siblings. And Laverne, her daughter, though, there were her siblings who were also invested in horse racing too. But Laverne didn't end up having the same amount of enthusiasm and commitment to horse racing that her mother did. But still, she grew up around horses. But yeah, in 1959, Sylvia did take the exam to become a licensed racehorse trainer. And that's where her first comes in. So people would have to have a state permit for 3 years and another racing job before they could apply. And there was a written and a practical part of the test. So the written part of the test would be like, talking, you'll have to answer questions about how to care for horses. And then there was a practical where you actually have to work with the horse. If someone didn't pass the test, they would have to wait 6 months to a year to retake it. So it was a pretty big deal. But Sylvia did pass her test and she got her license. And so She got the first Black woman licensed to train racehorses in the United States. So Sylvia did face like racial and gender discrimination during her time working as a trainer. Like in general, it wasn't seen, the racetrack wasn't seen as a place for women, Black women especially. So she faced like people calling her negative epithets because she was Black. But, you know, she was also working in West Virginia. So people at larger racetracks didn't always know about Sylvia. But, you know, the way that her family members described her is like she didn't really talk much. She was grateful for what she did. She enjoyed her job. And she didn't really like have a lot to say about those experiences that she dealt with. But yeah, Sylvia and an attorney who was named Lee Bushong eventually teamed up to breed racehorses with Sylvia's retired mare, who was named Chalky. Chalky died in 1967 when she was giving birth to her fifth foal. And Sylvia had her own methods of like taking care of her horses. She seems like she was really in tune with her horses. So it's described as that she would even maybe no more than her vet. She would go to her vets, but she would just be able to look at a horse and tell them what was wrong with them without any sort of, you know, extra investigation. It's like, oh, if you look here, then you can see this is what's wrong with the horse. So she fed her horses wheat germ oil that would help with making their coats shinier. She would feed them flax meal, which would apparently help them shed their winter coats. She gave them peppermint candy as a treat. She would put Jell-O in their feeds, which was apparently helpful for their hooves. And she would also put Guinness in their feet from time to time because it would encourage them to eat and maybe sweat more. But when she was training her horses, she was working with them as individuals. So based on what she would see, based on what she would observe about their mood and how they did in their sessions together, that's what she would base her treatment of them on and her care for them on. But in 1963, she and John separated and they ended up divorcing in July of 1967. She said that he went into the music business and they didn't see eye to eye. He stayed in the entertainment business and he did keep in touch with Laverne, although Sylvia had custody of Laverne. But Sylvia continued to train horses for many owners. Now, she did struggle financially. So throughout her story, you'll see like she owed people money. She had trouble paying for things. She borrowed money to be able to pay for supplies for her horses. When she would earn money from the races, that's when she would go and buy a pickup truck. And that pickup truck was like to help her with work. So it would help her haul things. So there were definitely financial struggles throughout her life. Like, so horse racing wasn't something that made her like really rich during her lifetime. But to make extra money, in 1974, Sylvia did pick up another job and she was working at a Doubleday publishing factory in Berryville, Virginia. She still lived at her house in Charlestown, but she wasn't training at the racetrack during the time she was working at that factory. She did end up getting married to another man named Theodore Wells, although they divorced in July of 1976. So yeah, she's working at the factory, trying to make extra money, but she left her job in the factory in 1986. So the whole time she hadn't forgotten about working at the racetrack. She wanted to go back to racing, and she did that in 1987. She bought a horse named Half Quacked, and that horse won her first race, but none of the races with Sylvia after that one, unfortunately. And she still needed more money. So in the 90s, she was renting out rooms in Payne's Hotel, which was a 20 room house that she inherited from Lavinia Payne. And there was a tap room that was on that bottom floor. And the venue was pretty popular with the Black folks in the community. But by 1998, she was like still struggling with bills. She had medical bills. She had utility bills, credit card bills, and she had like close to $20,000 worth of unpaid income tax. So she ended up having to borrow against her home. But she was still racing the horses. She was still training racehorses. And between 87 and 2000, she raced 349 times and she won 44 times. And the horses that she trained won just over $166,000. But yeah, she was getting older. And in January of 1999, she sold her home for $65,000. She went to move into the Charles Towers, and her family, promised to come check in on her, take care of her. But even though she sold her home, she still had to pay her mortgage off, and there was an income tax lien. So there wasn't a ton of money left over after that. But she ended up retiring from racing then. She was honored, though, in her lifetime. In 2003, the West Virginia legislature honored her as the first licensed Black female thoroughbred horse trainer in the U.S. and West Virginia. And she's had a plaque dedicated to her. I think it was last year that there was a ceremony with a sign put up about her in West Virginia. But yeah, she woke up sick on Christmas Day in 2004. She was put in an ambulance, went to the hospital, and she died a couple of days later on December 27th, 2004. And that's the story of Sylvia Rideoutt Bishop.
I'm really glad you brought this one, as always. And I'm really interested to read this book because it sounds like this whole world of horse racing is something I just know nothing about. And I love, it sounds like she cared about the horses so much. And she had this just love that was there from when she was a child. Like it was just something she felt. And I always love to see that when people do get to follow that spark inside them. It is unfortunate that she wasn't making that much money from it, but I'm glad that she got to do it. She seemed to really love it.
Yeah, she did. And like she had a child, she had grandchildren too, that had become invested in horse racing and horses. And also like her siblings also were in horse racing and working with horses too. So, even beyond her legacy, it was also something her family was involved in and still is. So it's not like when she passed away, all of her legacy ended with horse racing. It still continued. And, she had stuff named after her. And she was put in the Hall of Fame in West Virginia. So, yeah, it's pretty inspiring still,
I like that you have details about, or they gave details about the food and the diets of the horses. I'm like, that is so specific that was very important to the narrative in the story, that she knew exactly how to care for them. Like she was doing things way in advance that people are talking about. I'm like, okay, she knew it. She was like, I got to do this for the hair, make her glow, make it pretty. I got to do this for the Guinness, another highlight. The Jell-O threw me off, I'm not going to lie.
Well, apparently it was, gelatin is supposed to be good for it. So it had something, it was kind of along those lines. I know that it was like some stuff had a little bit more truth to it than other things did. And there were a lot of things that people were doing because it was competitive also. Right. So, I mean, we didn't really get too much into it, but the races themselves, they're very competitive. People are betting on them. There are thousands of people in the grandstand on the day of the races. Even in these smaller places, people travel from all these different cities to come go to the races. So they were big events and they were competitive. And even though they only lasted so long, it's like a horse race was a super short event, but they were dramatic. And, there was a lot riding on, not to be too on the nose, riding on these races. The stakes were high. So yeah, there was a lot that people did to win, as people do in any competitive sport. Like the drugs that they gave the horses, the drugs that they gave themselves, the ways they had to lose weight. They figured out to lose weight in ways that, were questionable, some against the rules, to be able to give themselves the best shot of winning on the day of. But then there was a lot that was obviously up to chance and luck and timing as well. But yeah, all of that was a part of it. And the thing that I was thinking about this, because I'm not too well versed in horse racing either. Like, it does seem like one of those things when you're in it and you have a history of it in your family, then, it is, it's something that can be passed down along generations and that, you can kind of inherit. But I was thinking about how betting heavy all of this whole industry and sport is. It's like people are betting on it, but also like as a trainer, as a jockey, all of the people who are involved in horse racing, it's all very like it's a betting game.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a whole lifestyle. Like that, this whole thing with like when I think about the Kentucky Derby and the long traditions that's in it, it is like even the traditions of going is passed down from generations and generations. Like how you're supposed to dress, the hats, and it's also like the different levels of it. And I don't know. I know maybe it's around the Derby time where I hear a lot of conspiracies and a lot of like controversies because of things like the weight and the type of diet and how I'm like, dang, they get sent like, I think there's even like murder stories behind it and like grand theft type of things. You're like, my gosh, this is a whole culture in itself.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's really fascinating. But like as someone who isn't a betting person, like in general, I'm like, I can't imagine being involved in something that seems so volatile and turbulent and up to chance. And then on top of that, a large mammal is involved. So it's like something you have to take care of that's like not a standard, you have to learn everything that goes along with the care of horses on top of all of that. And that seems like a lot of work. So definitely I acknowledge and recognize that in Sylvia's story.
Yes. And the people who are doing it right, caring for the horses.
Yes, that is another element to this. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Anney, because obviously there's a lot of, kinds of malpractices and things that are done that, I couldn't tell you how that's changed over time, but I imagine there have been more safeguards put in place over the years, like from when Sylvia first started working to the point when she died, when it comes to like how care is managed, how people who are participating in the events, like the kinds of rules they have to face when it comes to how they're like enhancements and, drugs and caring for themselves. So yeah, definitely a big part of this too. Whenever any animal is involved in something that humans feel strongly about and want to make money off of, there are going to be problems.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Yves, for bringing this story to us. We always love having you on. Where can the good listeners find you?
Y'all can find me. Y'all can just go to my website, which is yvesjeffcoat.com, YVESJEFFCOAT.com. And you can pretty much get to everything else from there. You can sign up for my newsletter. You can also find me on Instagram at Not Apologizing and on many other episodes of Sminty, talking about the accomplishments of women in history.
Yes. Go check all of that out if you haven't already, listeners. And maybe next time we talk to you, Yves, you'll have some horseback riding skills.
We'll see about that. Don't hold me to it, but you never know. Yeah, I'm do something different every day. I always get inspired by some whiff of something. So
yes. Well, can't wait to hear what it is next time you're on. In the meantime, listeners, if you would like to contact us, you can. Our email is hello@stuffI'venevertoldyou.com. We're also on Blue Sky at Mom Stuff Podcast. We're on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I've Never Told You. We're also on YouTube, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.